Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah. So welcome back to the study of fiqh according to the school of Madinah, according to the Maliki madhhab. So perhaps about a year or two ago, we started teaching this class based on the book al-Muhadhdhab min al-Fiqh al-Mālikī wa Adillatuhu, or the word al-Muhadhdhab comes from a verb that means to prune, but you could say the refined study of the Maliki madhhab according to its evidences. And this is written by an Algerian scholar, Sheikh Muḥammad Sukḥāl al-Majjājī, hafidhahu Allah. And his impetus for writing the book, which was really meant to be a teaching manual, was a means to introduce new students or a person that just had never formally studied fiqh before to studying fiqh according to the school of Medina. But he also knew that that could come with a great set of challenges because many of the essential or classic texts are quite large. A lot of their particular nomenclature or terminology, mustalahat, are quite obscure and dense, and perhaps just not, they're not really texts that are readily available to a new Muslim or to a person that's never studied fiqh, perhaps even an intermediate person, but somebody that wants to know, how do I worship Allah? How do I make wudu? How do I pray? How do I fast? And so on and so on. And so I selected this work by Sheikh al-Majjājī because I felt that it was short, it was concise. I liked that it was a book that is built on the Adillah, which if you've watched my other couple of videos that I've done recently, especially the one on Islamic or Muslim vocabulary, how we use a lot of terms, he wanted to have it built upon evidences that, we don't do a thing because this is the Maliki madhhab, but rather the scholars of the madhhab, the scholars of the school of Medina, they have their evidences for why they do things, and those evidences are pointing to obviously either the Book of Allah, to the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and of course to his companions and those that came after that understood. And so this is what it means to have a work that is based upon adillah. And so I like this particular format. And as I said, the book was small and concise, and it's meant to be a book that you can read through fairly quickly, and you can access the meat and the potatoes of whatever particular topic that you're studying. And then of course later on it would be presumed that a person, after completing a book like this, would then move on to, inshallah, more advanced text. But even if a person didn't, that this would suffice them for knowing how to create accurately do their various acts of ibadah. And so that's my reason for redoing this, because I saw that when we were teaching it on Saturdays, I think both that combined with having our tafsir class and then on top of that having our fiqh class on the same day, I know for some people was also just a logistics challenge to be able to stay that long for both. And so what I've decided to do is actually just pre-record these and put them up. And we have a Discord server, so the videos will be up here on YouTube. I'll link to them in the Discord, and then if anybody has any questions, they can field their questions. Of course, you can through the YouTube comments, or you can go to the Discord and you can field your questions there, inshallah. And so we're going to start with the first chapter of our book, known as Kitab al-Tahara. The word Tahara means purification, or how to attain a state of being pure. So Imam al-Majjājī begins by writing, Al-Tahara al-Mashruta li-sihhati salati naw'ani. He begins by writing that the types of purification that a Muslim needs to be concerned with, they are as they relate to being eligible, mashruta, being eligible to perform acts of worship. He says they are two types. So the first type of tahara that Imam al-Majjājī is going to mention here is taharatul hadath. Remember this word, al-hadath. He says, وَهِيَ الْوُضُوءُ وَالْغُسْلُ وَمَا يَنُوبُ عَنْهُمَا وَهُوَ التَّيَمُّمُ. So he says, hadath is a state of impurity that a person inhabits in their entirety when certain acts take place, such as urinating or defecating or passing wind. And in another video, we will list these all out, but just as an example here. And he says that the state of hadath prohibits one from performing certain acts like praying, like the salah, bodily, meaning you cannot do it. This state is counteracted by performing wudu for minor types of impurity, a minor kind of hadath, or by performing a ghusl, which is for a major form of impurity. Or when neither of these can be performed, you can neither make a wudu or you can neither make a ghusl, then he says, then a person is to perform a tayammum. And a tayammum is a kind of temporary substitute when one is unable to perform either one of those. And so he says that the purification of hadath is aimed at granting a state of purity. So when you make wudu, it grants you a state of purity. When you make ghusl, it grants you a state of purity, and likewise for a tayammum. The second one that he mentions is al-khabath. So keep this in mind as well. Remember this word, al-khabath. Khabath, he says, is a type of impurity on objects, and that might be, for instance, on your clothing, it could be on your body itself, or even on the place of prayer, like on your prayer mat or on the ground or the place that you're going to perform the prayer. So it is a type of impurity on objects which inhibits the performance of acts of worship, again, like doing the prayer, even if one has actually made wudu, even if one has removed the impurification of hadath. If the khabath is present, then you are unable to perform that act, such as the salah, such as the prayer, until these impurities are removed. Now we will discuss what are the impurities, or what constitutes the khabath. Again, we will cover that in a separate video. But again, you cannot do them until the khabath is removed. The purification of khabath is aimed at the removal of physical impurities. He continues by saying, وَتَحْصُرُ الطَّهَارَ بِالْمَاءِ الطَّاهِرِ فِي نَفْسِهِ الْمُطَهِّرِ لِغَيْرِهِ. So purification is going to be achieved through using water primarily. Water that he classifies or describes as being tahir, being pure, but also fi nafsihi, in and of itself. So water as a substance in Islam is deemed to be not only a pure substance, but as he also adds, al-mutahhiru li ghayrihi, it is also a purifying agent. So water can then be employed for both the removal of hadath, like let's say you passed wind, or you fell into a deep sleep, or you relieved yourself in the bathroom. Water can be used for that. If you had sexual relations with your spouse, water will be used for that. And therefore, water is it's a purifying agent. It is al-mutahhir li ghayrihi. Wa huwa al-ma'u al-baqi. So the other attribute that Imam al-Majjājī points us to is that this water should be water that is in a natural state. وَهُوَ الْمَاءُ الْبَاقِي عَلَى أَصْلِ خِلْقَتِهِ. It should be in its natural state. But there are some caveats. الْمُتَغَيِّرْ بِمَا لَا يَنْفَكُّ عَنْهُ غَالِبًا لِمَوْضِعِ قَرِيرِهِ وَمُرُورِهِ كَالْمِلْحِ وَالْمُغْرَى. He says that, however, if it has been changed in some way, so if water is just not, it's not Evian, it's not Fuji, so to speak, it's not water that is pure water, but it has been al-mutaghayyir, it has been through some type of change, we have to determine, well, what is that change? And depending on the kind of change, that water may still be able to be used. So he says, al-mutaghayyir bima la yanfakku, water that is altered by something inseparable from it. So you could take, for instance, water from the ocean, which is salt water. So there is, now, you can use desalination to remove the salt from the water, but in general, without having to go through something super complicated like that, that salt water from the ocean is deemed to be, that's how that water is natural in its state. So obviously we have fresh water that doesn't have salt, and then we have ocean water that does. Though ocean water has the presence of salt, that's still considered natural. That is a type of natural water, and that it is bima la yanfakku. It's something that it cannot be bima la yanfakku anhu. It's something that cannot be easily separated from it. And so in that case, it is still something that is usable or employable to make wudu. He said this could include things like salt water, right? It says kal milhi wal mughra. Mughra here you could translate as a couple things. It could be water that has natural deposits in it, like clay or like ochre, which is like a kind of, it's a natural deposit that's within the water that could potentially change the color of the water. But that in and of itself does, again, as long as it's something that's naturally present in that water, or like perhaps seaweed or kelp that can give the water a greenish tinge to it, then this is something that is still considered acceptable. Or by something that is also in it, as we just mentioned, like seaweed or algae. And so he gives some examples of then what kinds of water can be used for wudu. Of course, inshallah, the water that comes out of our tap, generally speaking, unless there is, something else that happens. He says rainwater, this can be used, right? Al-matar, or what they call al-ma, al-nazil, water that comes from the sky, rainwater. Or you have ma'ul bahar, seawater, or maya'ul abar, wal uyun, wal anhar, as well as from wells, springs, and rivers. So, generally speaking, and to recap, there are acts in Islam that require one to be in a state of purity, like performing the salah. The way that we have to determine is, am I a person that has lost a state of purity, like because I went to the bathroom, so to speak, or am I being impeded from accessing purity due to the presence of impurities on either my body, my clothing, or my place of prayer. So the first being the hadath, that's like going to the bathroom or having relations with your spouse. And then the second is going to be the khabath, and that would be the presence of some type of impurity. And again, we will list these in a separate video because I want to make it a little bit easier for us to digest and understand this terminology, just a little bit at a time. He goes on to describe water. What is water? Water is pure and it is a purifying agent. And that whether that water is pure and it has been through no change, or even if it has been through a change but it doesn't change the natural state of the water, then even if it has the presence of things like clay or algae or seaweed or salt, in the case of salt water from the ocean, then this is acceptable to use. And inshallah, in the next video, we will continue to expand and go into a bit more detail, talking about, for instance, well, what are the things that invalidate the taharat al-hadath, and what are the things that prevent the taharat al-khabath, and what can we use to remove those. And inshallah, we'll cover that in the next video.